All right, I just had my first experience with the American healthcare system, and it was very apropos given the live stream that I just did with Uncivil Law, where we talked about the differences between the Canadian and American healthcare system. Apropos is fancy talk for timely. And yes, I just made a Fancy Nancy reference. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and there's going to be very little law in this particular vlog. This is going to be more of a story time vlog. So for whatever the reason, two of our kids celebrate spring break in the second week of February. It's not so much spring break as it is a delayed winter break. And this year we decided to come down to New York City because we love New York City, and we try to come down here as often as we can, which is typically once a year if we're lucky. And when we come to New York City, we do a lot of walking. And when I say we do a lot of walking, we do a lot of walking. Now, we have 3 kids and 1 stroller, and oftentimes 2 of those kids don't very much appreciate sharing the stroller. And I always end up carrying one of those kids on my shoulders while we walk around the city.
Do you appreciate where you are? You're in Times Square. Is this not the most amazing thing you've ever seen in your life? You got everything. You got billboards. Look at this. Look at this. Yeah, those M&Ms, eh? All right, you know what? Then we're going to spin around fast.
The first day of walking, I think we did a little over 10 kilometers. The second day, we did a little over 13 kilometers. And at the end of the second day, I started noticing that I was having excruciating back pain. At first, I chalked it up to back pain from having carried the kids, but it wasn't like this deep muscular pain. It was sort of this superficial skin pain. It sort of felt like I was wearing a shirt made out of broken glass. Now, I can deal with pain very well. So when I say this was excruciating pain, I mean wake me up and keep me up in the middle of the night, excruciating pain. And when I woke up the next day, I noticed I had something of a rash under my armpit, and doing what all kids do, I called my mommy and I asked her what she thought. And she said, "Dave, it sounds like you might have shingles." And I have always associated shingles with old people. I've known a lot of people with shingles, and they were always my parents' friends. So I was a little reluctant at first to accept the idea that I, at 40, have shingles. And she said, "You know, it's actually quite funny. Another one of our relatives has shingles right now. Call him up and see what he thinks." So I call him up, we talk on the phone, I send him some pictures, and he says, "Yeah, it kind of looks like you have shingles, so you might want to go see a doctor." And I said, "Nah, we're going to be back in Montreal in 2 days. I'll go see a doctor when I get back to Montreal." And he said, "No, actually, if you don't catch it in the first 2 days with antiviral medication, it can actually cause long-term nerve damage." And then, doing what all hypochondriacs should not do, I started Googling shingles, and I started seeing the long-term effects, and I was like, I better get to a doctor ASAP. And it was the first time in my life where I immediately had that reflex, whoa, how much is this going to cost me? We're not in Canada anymore. And I started doing this cost-benefit analysis that I'd never done in my life. How much is this going to cost me? What are the risks of long-term damage? Should I just take my chances and wait until I get back to Canada to do this for free? I'm going to put free in scare quotes, and I'm going to get back to that later. Now, for right or for wrong, I said, hell or high water, I am not going to an ER. I would sooner take all of the risks with long-term damage than going to an ER. Whenever you go to an ER, you come out with more than you went in with. And then my wife looks up some private clinics, and New York City being what it is, there was a private clinic that was still open until 8 o'clock that night, 50 yards from where we were staying. So I gather all of my insurance information, and I head over at 7:33. Bear this time in mind because it's going to be great for the punchline that's coming. I walk into the clinic at 7:33, and I say, "How much is this going to cost me? I think I need to see a doctor because I think I have shingles." And the person behind the desk says it's $250 for the initial consult. That doesn't include x-rays, blood tests, medication, or follow-ups. And I said, okay, that's good. I don't think I'm going to need any of those things. I just need to see a doctor and get the medication. Do you have any idea how much this medication might cost? And she says, I don't know. It could cost anywhere between $200 and $500. And I was like, okay, I can absorb some of these costs if my insurance doesn't cover it when I get back to Canada, but I'm just going to go to the pharmacy, which is also right across the street, see how much this medication is going to cost, and see what I'm gambling with in terms of hard costs. So I say, I'll be back in 2 minutes. I run to the pharmacy. I say, how much is this medication going to cost? They say, anywhere between $85 and $100. I say, good, I can absorb $350 US if that's the worst that happens. I go back to the clinic. I walk in, and they say, whoa, we're closed. And I look at her, I say, you're joking, right? You remember me. I was here 5 minutes ago. I said I just needed to go check the price of the medication. And I'm not kidding. She says, you said you were going to be gone for 2 minutes. It's 7 minutes. We're closing up now. It's 7:44. They close at 8. And at this point, I realized she wasn't joking, but I still thought there was a glimmer of hope for a pathetic Canadian with a good smile. And I was like, come on, I just need to see a doctor so she can prescribe the medication so I can go get it across the street. And she said, sorry, we're closed up. And this brings me to the first moral of the story. Any system is only as good as the people behind it. In Canada, the government-run buildings, when they say they close at 4 o'clock, they close at 4 o'clock. And by 4 o'clock, I mean 5 to 4. At 4 o'clock, the gates come down and they are closed to the world. I would have thought that at a private clinic in the United States, they wouldn't necessarily have that type of mentality, but apparently, at the very least, at this place, they did. So I look at her and I say, I'm really not going to get anywhere with you. You're really not going to let me see a doctor? And she said, the doctor's already gone. Sorry. And so I start to panic a little bit because I'm still not going to an ER and I have to figure out how to get this medication, which I know exists 50 meters across the street at the pharmacy. And I start thinking, I've got two best friends in New York City, I've got relatives in the United States, I have to be able to find a doctor in New York City who can at the very least prescribe me the medication that I need for these shingles. So I start texting everybody I know, best friends, relatives, anybody who I think might know of a doctor in New York City. And but for the grace of God, one of my relatives knows somebody who's a doctor, and she says, yeah, it really looks like you have shingles. I get the prescription, I get the pills, and that is the end of my evening of drama. Now, I did not have an ER experience. If I'm going to have one of those, it's going to take something more than shingles. But I had a genuine experience with the American healthcare system where I started to have the reflexive concerns that Americans must have on a daily basis. And getting back to the free aspect of healthcare in Canada, this is something that I discussed with Uncivil Law in the live stream I did with them. If you haven't seen that, I posted a highlight where we talked about this specific question. I'm going to link that video right here. In Canada, we refer to it as free healthcare, but the fact is that it's already been paid for in advance with your tax dollars. What might make it something of a desirable socialized healthcare system is that it is paid for by tax dollars, which means the more taxes you pay, the more you subsidize the healthcare system. So it is free to everybody, whether you pay no taxes or whether you pay $10 million in taxes. Except if you pay $10 million in taxes, you have financed the free healthcare system much more than someone who pays no taxes has financed it. But the main point is that it is financed, paid up for in front so that when you go to a doctor, you don't actually have to open your wallet. In the States, the healthcare system has not been subsidized by way of taxpayer dollars so that it's not free when you walk into the ER. So individuals have not been taxed in advance for healthcare services that they may or may not use. They're taxed sort of a la carte as they show up for services as they need them. And to some extent, it's sort of six of one way, half a dozen the other. You either pay for it in advance with your tax dollars or you save those tax dollars but pay for it a la carte as you show up for whatever services you need. In Canada, it's subsidized through tax dollars, so if you pay zero in tax dollars, you are basically not paying into the healthcare system, even though it is free to you. But for whatever amounts those who don't pay enough in taxes don't pay into the system, those who make a lot of money and pay a lot of taxes pay more into the system. In the States, the issue is insurance costs and deductibles, which don't vary depending on your income. So someone with minimal income is going to have to pay as much in insurance as someone with maximum income. And that's sort of where the socialized aspect of the healthcare system in Canada is somewhat commendable. It's free for everybody, but the rich who pay a lot in taxes subsidize the free healthcare system more than those who don't pay a lot in taxes. Whereas in the States, it's a question of insurance premiums and deductibles. And for the first time in my life, I actually had to think whether or not I was going to go see a doctor based on how much it was going to cost me at that moment. It was an actual financial cost-benefit analysis that I had never had to make in my life before. And I could see how certain people say, nah, I'll just live with the consequences because I don't want to fork out $350 for shingles. I can see how people make medical decisions based on the amount of money they have to pay for them at that time. The one funny economic principle is that if you pay for certain things via tax dollars, it's much different than if you are expected to make that money, not pay tax dollars, but when the time comes to pay for it, fork out that money. The reality is that if that money is not taken off the top in advance, typically people don't end up saving that money for those purposes. And I can easily see the reality that although people don't pay upfront for the system via their tax dollars, they don't necessarily save that money either to pay for the events when they occur. And then it still ends up being a question of whether or not I have $350 in my bank account to go get a consult, to go get the medication because I have shingles today. It was interesting, it was eye-opening, it really highlights the fact that systems are only as strong as the people behind them. When I first opened up my law firm and I had to open up a trust account, I went to my bank and expected that they would know how to do it. They were, after all, only one of the biggest banks in Canada. But lo and behold, when I went to set up that account, every single time they set up the account, it had problems because the people who were doing it simply didn't know how to do it. Even the biggest bank in Canada is only as competent as the person you are dealing with at that time. And when I walked into that clinic and the person said, sorry, we're closed at 7:44 because you took 8 minutes instead of 2 minutes to come back, yeah, that was frustrating. The other takeaway I had from this is that no matter how good or bad a system is, it always helps to have connections. And I'm not saying this as a billionaire, politically connected individual who knows people that can sneak me in the door. Having a network enables you to troubleshoot when problems occur. But if there was one bottom line takeaway from all of this, it is the importance and value in maintaining good human networks. It's the importance of community and helping people out to the extent that you can help them out. And I only wish that everybody could and would have the same network of support where if they are in a problem situation, they can reach out to their friends and someone will help them out. It sensitized me to the financial and human aspect of this. People who are sort of isolated, don't necessarily have the same network, are oftentimes just left out to dry. Above and beyond having a system that works and services that are affordable, people need to have a network that they can tap into when they have problems that they can't solve on their own. Anyhow, all that to say, shingles also hurts like a son of a bee sting. I wouldn't describe it as crippling, it just feels like whenever I touch my own skin that I'm touching it with a freezing cold piece of metal. And I'll tell you something else, the stigma that goes along with admitting you have shingles, I feel like I have cooties. As a 40-year-old, I feel like I have cooties. I always thought that if I had chickenpox as a kid, it meant that I would not be susceptible to getting shingles as an adult. I didn't know it was the exact opposite. Anyhow, yes, I have shingles. I am a 40-year-old man. I have shingles. And if there's a silver lining to that cloud, it has given me this experience. All right, I hope you like this story time. If you like my video and you like my content, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share my channel with someone who you think might appreciate it. Drop a comment in the comment section below. Share your shingle horror stories if you've had them. Let me know what you think of my assessment. If you want to support the channel, there are merch links and a PayPal link in the pinned comment. Oh yeah, and should I reopen my Patreon account? That is the question. While I think of the answer, now you know your vlog. Peace out.